Good morning, everyone. I am Monica Estabilio.
Good day, everyone. My name is Nicole Malazamay.
I am Bessie Diso Basada.
Good morning, I am Christine P. Roque.
Module 14 is entitled The Constitution of the Philippines and its Implications to Development. Philippines has had a total of 6 constitutions since the proclamation of independence. So when the revolution was launched against Spain, the revolutionaries, Emilio Aguinaldo to be specific, declared independence in Kawit Cavite on June 12, 1898. The revolution happened that time is the Spanish-American War. Aguinaldo saw a possibility that the Philippines might achieve its independence. The America defeated the Spain, and that was called the Battle of Manila Bay. And that time, the first Philippine Republic was created, and that is the 1899 Malolos Constitution. Years passed by, more constitutions existed, namely the 1935 Constitution, 1943 or the Japanese Constitution, 1973 Constitution, 1986 Provisional Freedom Constitution, and 1987 Constitution. Those constitutions will be discussed later. We have now background information on how the first Philippine Republic created. And now let me ask you guys, we often hear the word constitution, but what is it all about? Constitution is a codified list of provisions that identifies the limitation of the power of the government and enumerates its responsibilities to the people. Constitution is a codified list of provisions, meaning it is a collection or set of fundamental principles arranged in a systematic order in one document. The fundamental principles that I am talking to are the laws that regulates the government and other social institutions. It is a set of established precedents and codified principles according to which a state is governed. Like what I've said, it is consisted of fundamental principles or laws. It also provides responsibilities of the different departments or branches of government and the citizens. It also provides precedents that serves as a guide or justification for a subsequent situation. For example, nagagamit ang Constitution kapag may trial sa court upang malitis ang isang kaso. It also provides principles on how to rule a state, nation, or other organization. Constitution is the highest law of the land. In the Philippines, the 1987 Constitution serves as the supreme law of the Republic of the Philippines. It is the highest law of the land or supreme law because it binds all individual and the government together as one. So, ano nga ba ang purpose ng Constitution? Para saan nga ba ito? First, it serves as a supreme or fundamental law of the land. Like what I've said kanina, it is the supreme law of the land because if the government made any laws that violates or may nilalabag sa Constitution, it will be considered void or nothing. Hindi siya may kukonsidered na nag-i-exist. Second, it establishes the basic framework and underlying principles of government. Meaning, sa Constitution nakasaad ang mga responsibilities and duties of different departments or branches of government. And dito din malalaman yung mga limitation ng power and authority nila. For an instance, the three branches of government which is the judicial, executive, and legislative branch. For the legislative branch, they are the one who makes law. Sila po ang nasa Congress and Senate. Second is the executive branch. Sila po ang nag-enforce ng mga law which is the President. And lastly, the judicial branch which is the Supreme Court, sila po ang nag-i-evaluate ng law. So, why do we need constitution? First, we need constitution to define the organization of the government. Constitution of every country is important because constitution lays down all the legal aspects on how to govern a country. Imagine kapag walang sinusunod na batas yung mga tao, magkakaroon kayo ng progressive at maayos na community or country. Hindi. To determine the distribution of government powers, like what I've said earlier, sa three branches of government, may kanya-kanya silang mga duties and responsibilities. Hindi pwedeng gawin ng legislative yung ginagawa ng executive. Hindi lang responsibilities and duties and government ang nakasaad sa Constitution. It also includes responsibilities and duties of citizens, example sa mga business. It indicates the tax na kailangang bayaran ng mga companies, businesses, is like that. To define the rights of citizens. We, the citizens, can ensure our well-being and dignity because we have constitution. Pwede nating ipaglaban yung mga karapatan natin bilang tao kapag may kapwa tayong na-violate yung karapatan natin. It is also called as the right to freedom. So, alam na natin kung ano ang Constitution, ang purpose nito, at bakit kailangan natin ng Constitution. So, now let's proceed to the different Constitution the Philippines had. The first Constitution will be discussed by Miss Nicole.
Thank you, Miss Estabilio. So, we are here today to understand and talk about the history of the first Constitution. It is the 1899 Constitution, or what we call the Malolos Convention. It is drafted after the Congress of Aguinaldo Revolutionary Government. Also, it happened on September 15, 1899. So, this topic is the Constitution is all about the Republic, the government, the religion, the Filipino, and their individual and national rights, and so on. And dito sa Constitution na to ay nakapabilang ang mga rights na nating lahat ng mga Pilipino. Dito tayo nagbe-base kasi ito yung pinaka-first na Constitution na meron tayo dito sa ating bansa. Itong Constitution na to, pwede niya tayong i-rule o pwede natin itong pagbasehan para magkaroon na ang government natin ng progress. Para hindi malabag yung rights ng iba at para masunod ng lahat kung ano yung dapat para sa kanila. And yun na nga, yung sinasabi ko, October 25, 1898, nag-start yung discussion and debate about sa Constitution, about sa different na mga siguro kung dapat ba nilang aprobahan yun o hindi. Binasa nila yung Constitution na yun and yan pinag-usapan nila kung i-approve nila yun o hindi. Tapos tumagal siya ng isang buwan. Natapos yung discussion and debate nila noong November 29, 1898. Tama ba? Oo, 1898. Yun yung natapos yung discussion nila. Tapos, nung sumunod na nun, nag-discuss nila. Tapos, yung naging centered nung nabasa nila, yung naging nag-centered sila, na sentro sila dun sa sa topic na paghihiwalay yung church at yung state. Kasi, yung dalawang yun, yung church at yung state, nagko-contradict sila. Hindi sila pareho ng pananaw. Kaya yun, parang dun sila nag-focus. Tapos, parang hindi siya nagustuhan ng Congress. Then yun, hindi siya na-aprobahan. Pero nung binalik ni President Aguinaldo yung topic na yun, yung constitution na yun sa Congress, pinag-usapan nila ulit. Tapos, yun nga, naaprubahan na siya ng Congress noong December 23, 1898. Then, na-publicize yung constitution, yung first constitution na yun, noong January 21, 1899 na. Kaya yun na, tinawag siyang 1899 Constitution. And it was, sorry. And ito na yung naging first na naging constitution ng ating bansa. Then, yun na, naging formal na siyang, until now, inadat na siya ng ating Congress and our country. Kaya yun. So, yun yung pinaka-first na constitution na na-create sa ating bansa.
In general, the Malolos Constitution took into account the constitution of other countries, with marked Filipino resemblance such as those of Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Guatemala. The overall structure of the Constitution was borrowed from Costa Rica, Chile, and Spain. Nevertheless, the Malolos Constitution was never exercised as the Philippine-American War broke out on February 4, 1899. This led to the downfall of the First Republic of the Philippines, with the arrest of President Aguinaldo on March 23, 1901 in Palanan, Isabela. Okay, the purpose of the Malolos Constitution is to provide for a safeguard against abuses, and enumerated the national and individual rights not only of the Filipinos and of the Alliance. The legislative powers were exercised by the Assembly of Representatives composed of delegates elected according to the law and to establish a parliamentary form of government as a part of establishing and forming a republic in our country. The Malolos Constitution, it is considered the first constitutional democratic republic in Asia, with the aim of introducing to the world that the Filipino is capable of running an independent state even though we are still in the middle of war between the Americans and the Spaniards. Although it is commendable that we have a constitution because it has established our independence from those who want to usurp us. And it is also the beginning of a democratic electorate that reflect our country to the present. That's it. The second significant features of the Constitution is the Bill of Rights. The author of the Bill of Rights, it was James Madison Jr. Okay, the purpose of the Bill of Rights is to protect those rights against infringement from public officials and private citizens, and to guide a state to ratify Constitution and make sure every citizen have rights. The last right of the citizen were to ensure, according to the First Amendment, which is the freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and the right to petition. Okay? The freedom of religion means this is the freedom of believing anything you want to. And the freedom of press means this is the right to write, to publish anything you want to. The freedom of speech means freedom to say anything you want to with exception. Freedom of assembly means this is the right to have a meeting. The last one, the right to petition means this is a freedom to request to the government. Okay? The Bill of Rights was established the relationship of the individual to the state and defines the right of the individual by limiting the lawful powers of the state. The third significant features of the Malolos Constitution is the separation of church and state. The separation of church and state, the principle the government must maintain an attitude of neutrality towards religion. Many view separation of church and state as required by the First Amendment. The First Amendment not only allows citizens the freedom to practice any religion of their choice, but This was also prevent the government from officially recognizing or favoring any religion. In general, the Malolos Constitution took into account the constitution of other countries with marked Filipino resemblance such as those Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Guatemala. And the next topic would be discussed by Miss Christine Roque.
Thank you, Miss Bessie. Okay, so what I will be discussing is the 1935 Constitution. And during the American colonial period, the Philippines was governed by laws implemented by the past leaders of our country, and that includes the Philippine Organic Act of 1902. And it provides for the creation of an elected Philippine Assembly composed of Filipino, and the Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916 that announced the intention of the United States government to withdraw their sovereignty over the Philippine Islands as soon as a stable government be established therein. So to further explain, in 1902, American forces suppressed a Filipino independence movement, and Congress passed the Philippine Organic Act to establish civilian control. Among other provisions, the act authorized by two Filipinos resident commissioners to represent the Philippine governments in the US Congress. So doon nabuo, and parang doon na-create yung pagkakaroon ng Philippine Embassy sa ibang bansa, lalo it was first authorized in the USA. Okay, it was in 1916 that announced the intention of the United States government to withdraw their sovereignty over the Philippine Islands as soon as a stable government be established. So, in 1916, the American government announced that they will withdraw. Parang tatanggalin na nila yung connection, or yung bibigyan na nila yung freedom sa Philippine government as soon as the Philippines will have a stable government and establish a better law, a better way of governing our country. Okay, next is the Philippine Independence Act that set the parameters for the creation of a constitution of the Philippines, and it was passed by the American in 1934. This also called for the elections of delegates to a constitutional convention that aims to draft a constitution for our country. And to explain more, the Philippine Independence Act, or the Tidings-McDuffie Act, that was enacted in March 24, 1934 to be exact, is a United States federal law that established the process for the Philippines, that an American colony, to become an independent country. A free country with its own government and laws, free ways of controlling our country. And under the Tidings-McDuffie Act is the creation of 1935 Constitution of the Philippines and Commonwealth of the Philippines. Under the Tidings-McDuffie Act, it is said that nabuo or na-establish ang 1935 Constitution and the Commonwealth of the Philippines. And direct elections of the Philippines legislature had been held since 1907. To be exact, it was 1907 when the first legislative Philippine elections have been held. And it also limits the Filipino immigrants to the US, and it was signed by the late President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Next will be reported by Miss Istabilio.
Thank you, Ms. Roque. So now we will proceed to the Japanese Constitution. The Japanese-sponsored government during the Second World War nullified the 1935 Constitution and appointed the Preparatory Committee as replacement. The 1943 Constitution, which replaced the 1935 Constitution, was used during the presidency of Jose P. Laurel in the Second Republic. So, after the Americans, the next one who came in the Philippines are the Japanese. President Manuel L. Quezon, who is the president during the American period, declared Manila as an open city. When we say open city, it means that the opposing military will peacefully occupy the place rather than destroy it. So, and that's why Japan entered the Philippines. The Japan gave an option to the Philippines. Yan po yung sinabi ng Japan sa Philippines na gawing diktatorial ang pamumuno sa Pilipinas. So when we say diktatorial kasi, military yung mamumuno sa isang country. Just like sa Japan, nung pumunta sila dito, military government yung the way na mamuno sila sa atin is military government. But the Philippines refused the option that gave by the Japan. By that, the Philippines chose to make a Republic of the Philippines instead of a dictatorial type of government. So, may nag-exist na political organization or group during the Japanese occupation in the Philippines, and that is the Kalibapi or Kapisanan sa Paglilingkod sa Bagong Pilipinas. And that is the only political organization that is allowed during that time. And the Kalibapi created a draft constitution and it was led by Jose P. Laurel. On September 4, 1943, Jose P. Laurel, who led the Preparatory Commission, presented the draft constitution. And 3 days after that, Kalibapi had a General Assembly and they ratified or signed the draft constitution. And yan na yung tinatawag na 1943 Constitution na naging Second Republic of the Philippines. The 1935 Constitution came back into effect after the war in 1945 and was amended on March 11, 1947 with the Parity Amendment giving U.S. citizens equal rights with Filipino citizens to develop natural resources and operate public utilities. So on September 1944, President Jose P. Laurel declared martial law in the Philippines. Nag-declare siya ng martial law sa bansa dahil nagkaroon ng war between the America and Japan. Kung alam niyo yung history ng Pearl Harbor, yung war na naganap doon, ito po yung sinasabi dito. So when the Japan surrendered to America, President Laurel dissolved the 1943 Constitution at ibinalik ang 1935 Constitution at Commonwealth Government. All the laws and regulations stated in 1943 Constitution dissolved at naibalik ang 1935 Constitution at Commonwealth Government sa Pilipinas.
Part Marcos called a meeting to revise and amend the 1935 Constitution to make it more fair to everyone. He conducted a meeting, called a meeting to revise this Constitution, this 1935 Constitution, to make it the value of it, the validity of it, and the reliability of it is reliable. And the revise of this constitution was verified by the citizen assemblies. That was the Presidential Decree number 86 series of 1972 was created and built. This this revised constitution was inaprubahan siya nung yung ginawa ng Presidential Decree number 1886 series 1972. Yung ginawa nilang citizen assemblies, sila yung nag-approve nung na-revise na topic, na-revise na constitution. So yun, parang question ng court, na question yung validity or yung legality nung na-revise na constitution, dahil nga parang hindi parang nung time na yun parang hindi nila maintindihan kung naging legal ba yon, legal na naaprubahan ba, kasi yung nag-approve lang nun is yung nagawang citizen assemblies ng Presidential Decree number 86. Tapos yan, pero yun, so nung time na yun na parang hindi siya na-approve. Then nung napunta na siya sa Supreme Court, inapprove yung validity niya. Kasi nga, ano naman siya, yung nag-approve naman dun is meron naman siyang power to approve the revised constitution. And yun, naging aprubahan yung constitution na yun that time, na yung na-revise na constitution na yun is approved na. Yun yung revised na constitution na yun is more, na siya, mas clear na siya and mas fairer na siya sa iba. And parang wala na siyang flaws, ganon. Parang, yun na, naging, maayos na yung constitution na na-revise ng lahat, na inapprove ng Presidential Decree number 86. So, yun. Yun na yung part na to, na na-amend na, or na-revise na 1935 Constitution was approved by the Supreme Court.
Corazon Aquino, after taking oath over a provisional freedom constitution to formally assume the presidency, issued Presidential Decree number 13, which suspended certain provisions of the 1973 Constitution. A month later, President Aquino issued Presidential Decree number 9 series of 1986, creating a constitutional commission tasked to draft a new chapter to replace the 1973 Constitution. The commission came up with the Constitution on October 16, 1986, which was ratified by the people through a plebiscite on February 2, 1987. With Presidential Decree number 58, the new Constitution came into full force and effect on February 11, 1987. The new Constitution was written in such a way that it provided significant provision for checks and balances to prevent the missing of governmental authority by one person. Its preamble summarily implies the general perception against the rule of tyranny and oppression. Okay? This was the product of the revolutionary government after the massive Essay Revolution, before the 1987 Constitution was established. We first had freedom. This Constitution paved the way for Corazon Aquino to be proclaimed President of the Philippines. She changed the 1973 Constitution under Marcos' jurisdiction so that Corazon Aquino could be legally proclaimed President of the Philippines. This Constitution lasted only a year, while there was no new constitution that would change the power of the people's leader, particularly the semi-colonialism and imperialism led by the president to control the power of three branches of the government.
Okay, lastly, presently with the changing political landscape in the country, there are calls for constitutional convention that aims to change the form of government from unitary to federal. Unitary means system of political organization, which most of all the governing power resides in centralized government, governed as a single entity which the central government is ultimately supreme. Other proposals espouse for a change from presidential to parliamentary form. The past administrations after President Aquino attempted to change the form of government, although these attempts were not actualized or hindi na-approve or nangyari yung mga gustong plano ni President Aquino during his term. And presently, the administration of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte leads the campaign for constitutional change as one of its core government policies. So as you can observe, as you can see from President Rodrigo Duterte's performance and plans for the country, we can say na his government policies was a bit different from the past government leaders, from the past president of our country. And he was very serious about changing the old way of the government on handling our country.